Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. So we were just finishing, or did just finish, the talk on Buddha. And I'm going to read the last of that. And then I'd like you to be thinking, as I'm doing that, I'd like you to be thinking, is there any chapter in this book that you've read, that you've looked at, that you would like us to go ahead and study? Otherwise, we can just go ahead and follow along, and Christ is the next incarnation that comes up under this organization of the book. But we'll take a moment just as soon as I've finished reading this to see if there's something that you particularly would like to look at. Buddha's words are that nirvana is eternal peace, the peace of realizing the unborn, undying, and changeless reality, the practical spiritual solution to life's suffering. According to all the great religions of the world, is to go beyond the physical and the finite to that reality which is infinite and unchanging. You see, if you follow the teachings, not merely understanding them intellectually, and live life as taught by the great teachers, you will apprehend the truth here and now. Now, please take note of this tremendous promise made by Swami Prabhavananda, a realized soul. That was the consensus about Swami Prabhavananda. Certainly it's my opinion, that if you follow the teachings, not just understand them intellectually, but if you follow them and live life as taught by the great teachers, you will apprehend the truth here and now. So what an absolutely reassuring and embracing promise this is. Just do what you're told. And of course, if you read the first chapter of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, this is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna tells Mahendranath Gupta, M, the man who ultimately pulled together the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. He says exactly the same thing. So, again, good morning to everyone. Now, is there any particular talk in this book that we can go to that any of you, and please speak up, anything that you've seen in this book that you would like discussed and commented upon, please let's go to that talk. Anything?
Shankaraji?
Yes, Bala.
Peace and holiness.
Okay, peace and holiness. Any other
Yes.
nominations? Okay, peace and holiness it is. Let me get on my glasses and go to the table of contents. Thank you, Bala.
Okay, sir.
Now, what section is that in? We're in the incarnations and teachers. Is that in concepts or spiritual practices?
This is in concepts.
Okay. And you say it's peace and holiness.
Yes.
There it is. Okay. Away we go. Peace and holiness. Again, thank you, Bala, for being right with us. Peace and holiness. There is a desire in everyone's heart to find peace, but very few know how and where to find that peace. The idea of holiness, even the idea of holiness may even seem very dull and uninteresting. Oh, me. Excuse me, this is that thing where it goes wonky and I can't tell where I am. It goes backwards. Dull and uninteresting to many. But if we understand what holiness really means, we shall find that in being holy alone can we find peace. If we understand what holiness really means, we shall find that being holy alone, that in being holy alone can we find peace. We have lost our kingdom. There is a story about a king who lost his memory and was trying to find out where the king of his kingdom was. He went to everybody asking, "Where is the king?" Nobody would answer. Then at long last, he went to his prime minister, who said, "You are the king." In the same way, we have lost that kingdom of self, and we have to regain it. In every spiritual tradition, in every spiritual conceptualization around the world, there is this sense that the divine being that is within us so somehow lost the knowledge of its own divinity. As Saint Teresa of Avila says, it is only in us that God becomes so confused he asks questions. So we start with that as a premise. Now, in Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism, it's regarded as a natural consequence of the appearance of Maya. Maya is the illusion that disguises the reality of our true being. So we have to dispel the ignorance that is Maya. In the Bhagavad Gita, you will find that the incarnation of God is urging Arjuna, his general, to fight and not to yield. Here is the true meaning. Where is this battle going on? In Dharmakshetra, the field of holiness, and where is it going on? In Dharmakshetra, the field of holiness, and Kurukshetra, the field of battle. In this field of holiness, which is also the field of battle, each one of us has to fight. There are two forces within each of us. The forces of evil, as it were, are greater in number, but the general, the charioteer, the Lord himself is guiding us from within. The forces of good, though small in number, eventually will win out. Now, if you recollect, that's the situation at Kurukshetra, where Arjuna is pausing in his doubt and hears Krishna's song, the Song of God, Bhagavad Gita. The forces of Duryodhana were much larger in number than the forces under Arjuna's command. So when we hear that the forces of evil are greater in number, what is the inner meaning? We have, as human beings, in many, many lifetimes, many lifetimes, in many different forms, learned to cope with Maya. So we have all these mental impressions that add up to how we deal with living within Maya. The delusion is that we should live within Maya. No, we should dispel the ignorance that is Maya and live in our true self. But we have many habits and mental impressions that add up to living with and coping with Maya. So this is what it means that they're greater in number. There's this huge number of mental impressions, samskaras, that are resident in our being. They travel with us from body to body. They're part of the subtle body. And they're constantly under influence by the gunas. The gunas are constantly stimulating those samskaras, those mental impressions. And so we think that's reality. In fact, it's not reality. As the Swami reassures us, the general, the charioteer, the Lord himself is guiding from within. Krishna, the Lord, the divine presence, the divine being, is guiding from within. The forces of good, though small in number, eventually will win out. To give a modern example, Freud says that there is a conflict in us between two wills, the will to live and the will to die. Strangely enough, he calls the will to die the will to nirvana. And he points out that nobody can get rid of this will to die, but everyone can ultimately overcome the will to live, this clinging to life. The Hindu standpoint forgive me for the noise. I have the door open so as to get some ventilation. Occasionally we get a hot rodder. The Hindu standpoint is that the surface current of a river goes in one direction and that there is an undercurrent going in the other. The surface current goes toward enjoying life, toward pleasure, and the undercurrent moves toward realizing God, freedom, peace. Buddha calls the surface current the thirst for life. Jesus says the love for this life can be overcome. As a matter of fact, Jesus said he had overcome it on behalf of all his disciples. This is the great gift of the avatars. They can share with us their spiritual treasure, their spiritual attainments. But nobody can overcome the undercurrent that moves toward God. In some life or another, Hindus believe, each individual will have to face that fight, that battlefield of life in this field of holiness, and will have to overcome the evil forces and move toward the light, toward God, and attain peace. No one will be lost. So it's just a matter of when we're going to take up that battle. Not if, the Swami is saying, and the scriptures teach us. It's not a question of if we'll take up the battle, simply when. Now, should you feel guilty if you are not taking up the battle? No, that's not the point. Sri Ramakrishna said, a delegation of important, wealthy men from Calcutta had heard that he was preaching renunciation and was persuading some of the young people to follow him. And so they came to him at Dakshineshwar and they said, "Tell us, why should we not enjoy the world?" And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Go, enjoy the world. I have no objection. But when you are sick of it, return to me. I have the cure." So if indeed you are not yet sick of it, you can file that away, file all of these thoughts away about holiness and peace, and say, well, later on. It's probably not the most auspicious thing that you could do. But particularly since there is an avatar still in the world with us in his subtle form, that's our belief. Sri Ramakrishna is here. Of course, Jesus never went anywhere. All of the great teachers are there. But Sri Ramakrishna, there is a belief that he is more immanent, that he is here in his subtle body, easy of access to us, as the evening hymn says. So if you're ready to take up the fight, then by all means, go to those that have the cure, that have the cure for your worldliness. St. Paul said, The whole creation has been groaning in travail together until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly and wait for adoption as sons. Groaning. If you're groaning, if you feel the weight of this illusory existence, this Maya, if you feel it pressing on your spirit, then move toward peace and holiness. It's only when we ask for adoption as sons that we are adopted. The divine presence will never force itself on us. Never. And never listen to anyone who tells you that you must, that God demands it, that God requires it of you. No. The divine does not force itself on us. We have the ability to go on from lifetime to lifetime until we are ready. And when, St. Paul says adoption as sons, of course, immediately the parable of the prodigal child comes to mind. He wasn't being adopted, the son, he was being reunited with the father. But it was because he came home. My son has come home, the father said. Even though, this is speaking of St. Paul, even though he had the vision of Christ, he was still groaning in suffering until he says, we are adopted as sons of God. In this connection, the great Christian mystic, Angelus Silesius says, Christ may be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, but until he is born anew in your own heart, you remain forlorn. Christ may be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, but until he is born anew in your own heart, you remain forlorn. Or to speak of St. Paul or any Christian mystic, greater than all these, Jesus himself said, ye shall have tribulations in the world. Then he added in deeply comforting assurance to troubled hearts, be ye of good cheer. I have overcome this world. And I remind you what I said earlier. One of the things that these great beings have is the ability to share it with you. This is what Jesus meant when he said, ask and ye shall receive. If you ask your Father for bread, will he give you a stone? If you ask for fish, will he give you a serpent? No. They are eager to share their spiritual treasure with us. And that is the point. You have to overcome the world, but with their help, I'll add. A nation wants to conquer another nation. My ideal, and it must be your ideal and everyone's ideal, is not to conquer one nation or another, but to conquer this whole world. Think of that. This is my ambition, to overcome this whole world. There have been many nations that have been big empires. The Roman Empire, which has that, where has that gone? The English empire, where is it today? And if you follow the news, you'll see Great Britain the United Kingdom is struggling. They are no longer an empire. But we have to conquer the whole world. Where is the world? In our mind. So we have to conquer that mind. Then we are free in this world, everywhere. Now, before we move away from this point, this is one of the fundamental ideas of Sanatana Dharma, of Hinduism, of the Upanishads. The world does not exist out there. The world exists in here. It is made of our mental impressions. It is made of our memories. And so when we learn to master the mind and master the mind's tendency to recognize things outside, seemingly outside, as Vivekananda says in one of his talks, here is a book. Really, it is no book. It is unknowable what this is. Your mind and mine, he says, make this a book. To someone who had never seen anything like a book before, they wouldn't have any idea what it was. We make, because of our memory, because of our mental impressions, we recognize that as a book. So this mind that we have is manufacturing the world. Yes, we have this tremendous system of agreements among us about what the world is and how we share it. But that doesn't mean it's any more real. It just means we agree with one another about its unreality. So this is what's meant when the Swami said, where is the world? In our mind. So we have to conquer that mind. Then we are free in this world, everywhere. Let me quote Jesus. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not the world do I give unto you. There he is, sharing, Jesus sharing with us, offering to share with us his peace, his conquest of the world. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, do I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, do I give unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. What is that peace that Christ speaks of? The peace that passeth all understanding. Our mind, intellect, senses cannot grasp that. That's what's meant by passeth all understanding. Our understanding is made of our mind, intellect, senses, and words. Our mind, intellect, senses cannot grasp that. Again, let me quote the Bible. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace among men with whom he is pleased. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace. The peace that we're talking about, not peace among nations. That's not the point. And on earth, peace among men with whom he is pleased. You see that peace, you and I and everyone can have if we please God. And how can we please God? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. That is the way to love the Lord, who is the soul of our soul, who is not way out there, who is not way out there. Before any thought ever arises in you, he knows it. You can't deceive him. And he does not get mad at you. He is love itself. Now, the Swami almost tosses away one of the profound agreements that you find in the testimony of the great saints, the mystics. God does not get mad at us. God is love itself, forgiveness itself. God knows the nature of his or her creation. God knows the nature of his or her creation. That's why the Swami says, you can't deceive the Lord. And he does not get mad at you. He is love itself. If you move one step toward him, he moves 100 steps toward you. Now, this is not metaphorical. This is not some sort of phrase. If you move toward the Lord, so eager is the Lord to receive you, that you will find that the Lord moves toward you. If you move one step toward him, he moves 100 steps toward you. He listens to every prayer, and every prayer is granted. It may take time according to your earnestness, your sincerity. Pray for that love. And that's where, remember this, Swami started this, love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. But you can pray for that love. As it says in Chaitanya's prayer, grant me, O Lord, a steadfast love for thee. Pray for that love. Okay.
Brother, could you repeat what you said about the Roman Empire and British Empire, the disappearance of those? What was your response to that? What was the purpose of you saying that?
Well, just it's in what the Swami said. The Swami said the Roman Empire was there, huge empire. Where is it? The British Empire was there. Where is it? The things of the world do not last. No matter how huge, how important, they are not going to cohere. They will all dissolve.
Okay, so my follow-up question would be, I thought that's what you had said. Some sociologists would say that the Roman Empire and the British Empire both took on religious forms. The Roman Empire taking on the form of the Roman Catholic Church, and the British Empire taking on the form of the Anglican Church. There was religious. And so what would you say is the religious impetus or whatever, if that's true, what would be the religious impetus for us creating religious figures from those things that are disappearing in the world? What are we still clinging to, or do we kind of religiosize those?
How can we divinize? How can we divinize? Well, the first thing to do.
Why do we divinize is probably the bigger question. How and why?
Say it again, David.
How and why? It was a why question, but I would like to know how as well. So how and why?
Well, the first thing to do, according to Vivekananda, and this is divinize yourself. Understand that you are the divine presence. And this is, according to Vivekananda, this is the religion of the future. He said, it used to be said that a man was an atheist if he did not believe in God. I tell you that now a man is an atheist if he does not believe in himself. Why did Vivekananda say that? Because he had explained what the self is and how that is the truth of your being. So, David, the first thing to do is divinize yourself. Recognize the divinity within yourself. As Swami Prabhavananda said in his first instruction in meditation, feel that living presence. Then you divinize everything around you. Through your spiritual practices, you divinize everything around you. As you divinize the things around you, the things of your life, the things of the world, putting them in their proper place and understanding their inner divinity, the fact that all is made of consciousness, that all the reason we're drawn to anything is because it too contains the self. Then what happens is you begin to have an effect on the lives of other people. It doesn't matter if you say a word to them. You don't have to preach to them or talk to them. You simply, your presence among them. And this, I would say in your case, David, this is already a reality. Your very presence among them, they somehow, whether they know why or how or what the reason is, they feel lifted up. And so the religion of the modern age will be the religion of the recognition of the self in yourself and in everything. As one of the great swamis of the order wrote a book, Seeing God Everywhere. Now, of course, this is not new. This is not in the least new, but it was not the religion of the day. As a matter of fact, those who practiced this were often repressed, suppressed, even persecuted, even killed in the past. Now, because of the way the world is, there doesn't seem to be that overt persecution of, except in certain places, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. Did that answer your question, David?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Okay. Now that was exactly what I wanted. We're at a good place for more comments and questions.
Shankara,
Yes.
I understood the answer you gave him, but I missed what exactly David is trying to ask in his question. I missed that. Could you explain it to me, please?
He said that certain historians and sociologists said that the Roman Empire didn't disappear, that it transformed into the Holy Roman Catholic Church. that spread its influence all over Europe. The empire may have died as a political thing, but we still have rather than a Roman emperor, we still have a Pope Francis. Okay, so that's what happened to the Roman Empire. The British Empire, according to these historians and sociologists, did not disappear. It transmogrified, it transformed into the Anglican Church, which we have here as the Episcopalians and other denominations. So it spread its influence throughout the English, where the British Empire had its influence, the Anglican Church had its influence. And I can say that even this young man, Aditya, who lives with us here at the monastery, he was educated in churches that were residue. He was educated in schools, I'm sorry, that were part and parcel of what David was talking about when he said that the church had, the empire had changed into the church. And he was saying, okay, now what the empire that is disintegrating now, what will it become? Vivekananda said it would become, the religion of the future would be based in this understanding of the individual being as the true self. That is the truth of every being. And then I remarked that was not a new finding, but that certainly it's the testimony of the saints. Nevertheless, it is not being persecuted now. You don't get burned at the stake for saying that, or drawn and quartered, as a Sufi was. That is the religion that will be pervasive, according to Vivekananda. He said that was his mission, to infuse this truth into the Western world. Does that get it, Bala?
Yes, thank you, Shankaraji. Yes.
Okay.
Brother Shankara, this is Swayam.
Yes, Swayam.
Earlier in this last portion you read, and I may be mixing up the words or even the concept, but I thought I heard something that said that no one can get over or get rid of the will to die, but we can get over the will to live. The second part, I sort of get it, that we can, through practices, stop this clinging to life. But the will to die, it kind of confuses me. Is there?
Well, this is a Freudian concept here. This is a Freudian concept, and he calls the will to die the will to nirvana. That is to say, what the Buddha was speaking about, this transcendent state in which we don't truly die. The will to die is the will to freedom. We understand it as the will to freedom, the will to nirvana. And this is what Freud himself called it. The getting over the will to live is one of the points of our spiritual practice, that we stop being mortal and assume our true form, which is immortal, and is not forced by its desires and its momentum, its will to live, to take another human form. Did that clarify it?
Yes, thank you.
Haima, did you have something also?
So that means our body is mortal, but our soul is always immortal.
Absolutely. The body is clearly mortal. That's what's meant by it.
We see as mortal.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes. And so we, every one of us, if we just focus on it for a minute, we know that this will soon go away.
That's right.
Soon may be 50 years, but nevertheless, it may be even 100 years for some of the younger people among us. But it's going to go away. Why not transcend its limitations here and now, rather than having to wait until another lifetime is taken and we go through all of that indoctrination of growing up and confirmation and confirmation, all of what Don Juan Matus called our membership, and have to unlearn all that crap again. Let's do it now. Let's do it now.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
I have a small quote from Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
Yeah, he said in his book, Stillness Speaks, that's his book I was reading. He said, reincarnation doesn't help you if in your next incarnation, you still don't know who you are.
Precisely.
He said it very nicely in one single sentence.
Well, that speaks to David's question.
Yes.
You know, when we understand who we are, when we understand the reality that inhabits us, that the living presence, that's Swami Prabhavananda's first instruction for meditation. Whatever aspect of the divine being that appeals to your heart, which is called the chosen ideal. He says the reason that appeals to your heart is this: the chosen ideal is you yourself, no different. Learn to feel that living presence. When we learn to feel that living presence, and that is done through prayer, contemplation, concentration, and meditation, when we learn to feel that living presence, it changes everything. We no longer have the sense that I'm going to die. We're no longer afraid of the world in the way we have been afraid of the world. The more that living presence becomes a reality for us, the less the world is an illusion and a compulsion for us, which is what it means to overcome the world. Anything else?
Can I ask one more question at this time?
Of course, Swayam, of course.
Is there a way or a place to know more about what occupations the Buddha considered right and wrong? For example, I think he said the tax collection is one of the wrong things, and come April, I couldn't agree with him more. But sometimes it has its usefulness, I guess. But how is there a way to know, clarify that?
Swayam, the Buddha's definition of right livelihood is one that does not harm others, one that is of benefit in some way to the world. He didn't give narrow definitions, the Buddha himself. Now, you know, Mahayana Buddhism, the disciples of the disciples of the disciples of the disciples, they of course are great categorizers. And you can find in the texts of Mahayana Buddhism great disquisitions on right livelihood, great treatises on. But you'll find more truth in your own heart through prayer, using the gifts that you have been given by Swami Sarvadevananda. you will find more truth there about right livelihood. And don't worry, for God's sake, do not worry about anybody else's right livelihood, even your children's. They have to make their choices for themselves. You've given the best you can to them, and so their choices are their choices.
Thank you. It clarified my question.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, it's in Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter. Krishna explains this, Swadharma. And of course, he gives a big explanation. Even in the Swadharma, do everything in a dharmic way. So the dharma is the more important thing. Then, of course, he gives all the details about what is Swadharma, how the jati works, how the whole thing works. But that was, he gives the whole thing in a nutshell.
Yes, looking at the 18th chapter of the Gita will be informative. But I underline, you'll find great truth about your life and your livelihood and your doing. You'll find it in your heart through prayer, contemplation, concentration, and meditation. Thank you, Bala. Anything else?
The only thing I'm trying to memorize it to myself, but the thing that's, when you said divine never forces us, I think that is what is the Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the grace. We all have that grace. That's why we are all here trying to learn about it.
Yes.
And that is what maybe some people might consider as a free will, but even for the free will, it is that grace which is necessary to come on us. And
Yes.
that sentence really that,
So we have all raised our sails. No two ways
yes,
about it.
that's right.
And so the breeze of grace is blowing us along.
Yes. And the other thing is, the last sentence, what we are reading, he listens to every prayer.
Yes.
And every prayer is granted. That is the faith we have to keep.
Yes. It may take time according to your earnestness, your sincerity. And then he finishes by his great encouragement. Pray for that love. Fill our hearts full of love for thee. That's in the evening prayer to Sri Ramakrishna by Vivekananda. Fill our hearts full of love for thee. And in Chaitanya's prayer, O Lord, grant me steadfast love. As many times as I may be reborn, grant me steadfast love for thee. So it's 11:57. If there are no more questions, I'll read just a few lines more. It is said that God created the senses outgoing, so we can't help ourselves from always going out. As I said earlier, you have to be good to yourself about the fact that we are how we are. When we seek God, we think we can find him outside, also with the senses. When we seek peace, we seek for it outside for ourselves. We want to find peace and harmony in the world. And we believe that if there is no war, there will be peace. But there have been times of no war. Did people find peace? No. What happened between World War I and World War II? The world just became much more materialistic because all of the old values that had held the society together prior to World War I, they were all shattered. And there was no war. The world was at peace. And what happened? It became more materialistic. And as a result, they found cause to be at war again. There is always conflict and chaos in the world. Swami Vivekananda once said, "What is this world but a dog's curly tail? You straighten it today, the next moment it curls again. That is the nature of the world. The ideal of the millennium is not possible. That is to say, the 1,000 years of peace." And Swami started this particular train of thought by saying, God created the senses outgoing. And so most people, and I mean most people, never question this. And so they seek for happiness, peace, and fulfillment outside. And so naturally there's going to be conflict. Your wants run counter to my wants. Such and such nation first. No, such and such nation first. What does that lead to? It leads to what we see around us. Any other questions or comments before we wind it up?
Brother Shankara.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for being here today. I just had two comments on today's discussion. One is a quote from John Milton, Paradise Lost, where he said, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." And I just wanted to share that because it made me think about your discussion about, the mind and where the world is.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that. But the comment that I wanted to discuss about the senses is that I believe that they do seem outward, but I think that's a form of, I guess, delusion also, because the sound, when someone is say yelling at me, I can sense that it's towards me, but really, sight also is kind of coming. It appears like I'm looking out towards something. I guess maybe that's the amygdala or survival mechanism of the brain, but really it's I'm receiving the input of the light, whether it's the sun, solar, or artificial, of a lamp. It's vibrating off an object and coming towards me. So it's really not outgoing in that sense. And same with breathing. It's the term is take a breath, but really what it is, it's I'm opening up, I guess I'm not the biggest anatomy expert, so I don't know the exact terms, but it's we're opening up our windpipe and our lungs and taking in breath. So really, I guess what I wanted to say is I feel the senses, if we closely examined, are really also are not really outgoing. They just kind of appear that way. So that was just the point I wanted to make.
Well, of course, you're absolutely right, Liam, in that the sense organs are interior. We use them to create the world. But what the Swami means by the senses outgoing, it means that we we look out into the world for our satisfactions. That's what he means by the senses are made outgoing. Maya's intention, Maya's way of being is to keep us focused on the outward rather than on the inward, thinking that there is happiness to be found, peace to be found, fulfillment to be found outside. And as the Swami points out, what happens is when we achieve a little bit of fulfillment, of the fulfillment of a desire, what happens is in that moment, the mind is no longer restless because it has what it thought it wanted. It's transitory, but nevertheless, what happens is the peace and the bliss that was behind, always behind the screen, shines forth. And so you think, oh, I got a new car, it makes me very happy. No, the happiness was always there. You can much more reliably find it through spiritual practices and learn that the joy that comes with any fulfillment of desire on the outside is just momentary. Once again, these wonderful Mahayana Buddhists with their classification and categorization, their enumeration of things, found that the greatest honor, the most fulfilling thing that could possibly happen to you, the joy and the bliss of that will last only 3 days before the mind becomes restless again. So there we are. And it is desire, as Swami Prabhavananda pointed out, desire is nothing more than a restlessness of the mind. So we'll leave it at that. We'll start next week with Suppose There Is Only Light. All right. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door, saying, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all suffering and joyous beings everywhere. So until next time, tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, if you choose to join us, Dr. Lloyd Allen from the Mercer School of Theology will speak to us about Howard Thurman, the great mystic of the recent times, a black man who made quite a great spiritual wave. Howard Thurman.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Thanks to all.
So, until next time, Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace.
Thank you.
Until next
Brother
time.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, dears. See you soon.
See you.